Chapter 8. In and Out of Fort Clatsop. On December 7th, 1805, Lewis and Clark had the men start building a fort where they could live for the winter. There were plenty of elk to hunt, and the nearby Clatsop Indians were willing to sell their food. In honor of their neighbors, Lewis and Clark called their headquarters Fort Clatsop. It was constructed like all other forts, with logs stacked one above another, with separate huts and rooms, as well as a parade ground and a storage area. In 1805 and 1806, winter was long, boring, and rainy. Lewis wrote in his journal for hours every day. Clark spent his time drawing maps. The men didn't have much to do except hunt and make clothes and moccasins out of elk hide. That winter they made 300 pairs of moccasins. Why so many? They had learned the hard way that moccasins only lasted a few days. Then, one day, something happened to break the boredom. A dead whale washed up some miles down the beach. Everyone wanted to see the huge creature, including Sacagawea. Lewis and Clark planned to collect whale blubber to eat, whale oil for cooking. But the Clatsops claimed the whale as theirs. Lewis and Clark bargained with them. In exchange for the blubber and oil, they gave the Clatsops guns and ammunition. Another break in their boredom came with the arrival of some Chinooks. Their chief was wearing a magnificent robe made out of sea otter skin. One look at the robe, and both Lewis and Clark wanted it. But the chief demanded blue beads in exchange for the robe. Blue beads were prized by Indians, who called them chief beads. However, the explorers had already exchanged all of their blue beads for food and horses. They had no blue beads left. The Chinook chief refused to accept anything but blue beads until he saw the beautiful blue beaded belt that Sacagawea was wearing. The chief pointed to Sacagawea and made it clear that he would trade his robe for her belt. Sacagawea treasured her belt, but without saying a word, she unfastened the belt and handed it to the Chinook chief in exchange for his robes. Giving up a prized possession was her way of thanking Lewis and Clark. They had welcomed her on their trip. Clark had saved Pompey, her husband, and herself from drowning back in the Great Falls. Both men had seen her through her last terrible sickness. The rest of the winter was dreary, wet, and tiring. Of the 3 months in Fort Clatsop, only 12 days were without rain. The men had reached the end of their journey. Now, there was nothing to do but to wait out the winter. Then they would begin to trip back east.